live in a very mysterious world, one that's filled with mystery and we cannot explain certain things. My name is Fringe, and I'm a cryptozoologist and paranormal researcher. And tonight's show, we focus on the unknown, and come join me as we discuss the mystery of our world. And you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. Prepare yourselves as we dive into the madness of the mystery of our world. Good evening, everybody, and you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. I'm your host, Fringe, and tonight's episode we're going to be talking about the Rake creature. The Rake is a reported cryptid that has been seen throughout the U.S. as well as also throughout the world, and people who've seen this Rake creature have often described it as something demonic and something very traumatic as well. And I think tonight we're going to talk about this creature in a sense of it being that there are some mystery out there, but also too, I would also want to take notice that this creature has also been made reference in pop culture, as well as also been seen in internet memes. So there's a little bit of a mixed reaction, whether it is, of course, a genuine creature or not. I'm not trying to dismiss it as something that is of fabricated legend, but I think because there's a lot of mixed reaction to what we're really studying here, I think we'll just take the gist and go forth and take a dive into all of the possibilities of what this Rake creature could be. So tonight's show, we're going to be discussing this Rake creature and see what we can grab out of it, because this has been a highly requested cryptid to talk about, and I'm on the fence with it, and I'll discuss why in a second. But for all of our returning folks here, fellow Fringeaholics, good evening, everybody. It's so great to have you all coming into chat right now, and of course tuning in this after it premieres on YouTube. Also, too, it's great to see newcomers come to the show. Good evening and welcome. You know, the Rake cryptid is something that I've always had a mixed reaction on, because this is one of those creatures that necessarily, I recall being an internet meme. It started out as a creepypasta, and for those out there who aren't familiar with creepypasta is basically this little internet forum where people posted horror stories and creepy tales that could have been based on actual events. There have been people who were inspired by serial killers that posted fake serial killer stories on there. So basically it was like the original horror narrated website before it became a big thing on YouTube. So, you know, you have all of these interesting little stories patched there and there, and one of them was, of course, the Rake, and we'll read that story in a little bit. But the Rake cryptid had appeared on there, and since 2008, 2009, it's been a big phenomena, and now, thanks to modern day, there's been reports of people on forums like Reddit, and of course on these podcasts, you know, other cryptid-related podcasts that go ahead and they talk about the Rake creature, and they talk about how it's just so terrifying. And for me personally, I don't necessarily think that, I think we're having a misidentification of what this creature is. And not to go ahead and spill a bunch of bolts into this origin explanation segment of the show, but I mean, you have something here that started out as an internet meme and now has become something that's just truly translucent in stories and people who are reporting it, so we don't know what's true and what's not true. And I'm not trying to put out there in horror narrators, because that's a whole different ballgame, but in terms of research and investigation, you have people who are seeing it from a different perspective. We don't know if it's fabricated stories or, you know, information that's reliable. Researchers who can go out there and investigate these things. I've yet to hear a few investigations of a Rake creature. I know of the controversial BDRP episode with the Rake and Dogman and the authenticity of that such show, but in terms of what is real and not real with this creature, it's a controversial matter, and I think the idea behind the Rake cryptid is something of which is just truly translucent in just pure imagination. But could we be dealing with something here that is a skinwalker? And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the show, but I think we're dealing with a skinwalker here. But before I decide to change everybody's minds and proceed to make everybody feel uncomfortable, because I feel that there's going to be some folks who are going to, I wouldn't say unsubscribe or dislike, they might dislike, but they can also strongly throw me a negative feedback in the comment section, which I am prepared for in this matter, because I know that when it's a coming discussion of something like this, not everybody's going to agree with you, and many will disagree and will try to argue a valid point, which I'm prepared for and understand completely because, I mean, it happens. This is what the internet comes down to. But deep down, though, folks, I mean, if you do not agree with what I have to say tonight, it's totally cool. I mean, folks, we're all entitled to opinions, but just remember that information, it comes with a lot of resource. So a lot of the resource we're looking at comes from a creepypasta and a social forum where anybody could be making up stuff, even like when you do a podcast show. But still ranting off and going on into this, before we do get started with tonight's show, I just want to go off and say that we have, in just a matter of 10 days, the infamous Dogman Apocalypse show. We're going to have a 7-hour compilation of the 10 Tales of Dogman with restored and noise-reduced audio, which is going to be pretty cool for those out there who prefer to hear it in a better quality. As well as also we're going to be producing a brand new interview with Lisa Lycan, who's been on my show previously. And we're going to be doing a documentary show called The South Yorkshire Dogman, in which I've been following a 2-year investigation of reported dogman activity in South Yorkshire, as well as we're going to be producing an interview with the mouthpiece of the Dogman Encounters radio show on Bigfoot Eyewitnesses Radio, Vic Cundiff. A lot of you guys have requested Vic, and I wanted to say Vic for this special occasion. It is a very concrete interview that I'm going to be speaking with Vic on, so I hope you guys enjoy it, which I think you probably will. And I mean, it'll be a great little send-off before we conclude that 13-hour experience. And there's going to be a lot more surprises coming the way, so folks, I mean, lock and load, get your gears on, fasten your seatbelts. The Dogman Apocalypse is going to be coming. It's going to be pretty good, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So, with all that being said, let's take a brief overview on this Rake creature. And I think it's safe to say, too, that in many cases, like when we're investigating tonight with this Rake creature, as I mentioned before on the start of the show, this is one of those topics that is so widespread controversial-wise because there's just so much that can really be put on the table here that we could be looking at and could possibly be not a real thing. And I'm not trying to slam it if it's not, for those who believe in it. I just feel that we're misidentifying it and that it is a real creature, but it's not what we're trying to be calling it. It could be just a skinwalker, as mentioned. And with the skinwalker, the skinwalker, the ability of a man to shape from man to an object, in Native American folklore, it would make total sense. But of course, one of the things about this Rake creature reportedly is that it has the sensibility and the psychosis mindset of that of the Mothman, where it could leave you with traumatic thoughts, PTSD, bad dreams and visions. And I mean, there's a lot of people who often in these Rake reports have felt PTSD and gained PTSD, which is pretty common with cryptids, but have gained the dreams, have had weird visions, thoughts, and it's something that, whether it's true or fabricated hoax, something about a creature like that can manifest some sort of magnetic abilities, some sort of some paranormal bridge, which has often made some people think that the Rake is a demon. But, of course, like every other mystery and other weird thing in this world, and I mean weird in a great way, it's always good to take it in with an open mind. And I know that for some it might be a little hypocritical in a sense, but like, well, why, if it's from an internet meme or something like that, it doesn't seem to be an open mind. It seems like we're already slamming it. But really, I mean, this is the resources we know, but who's to say that, like I said, this could be a skinwalker? So part of tonight's show is going to be exploring not just encounters, but trying to dive a basic understanding that may also help for future research in the investigation of this creature. Because this is a very mysterious thing, and plus too, I didn't mention it at the start, but there are some pieces of evidence, or what appears to be something that's always stood out to me. I know for some people I've often been skeptical about it, but I feel that there are some things here that we should take a look at that I think for some can clear the air on. And a lot of it comes down to video footage that you are all very familiar with, involving this naked man or this guy that was in this backyard of this priest's house, or this pastor. And another is the infamous trail cam image of this zombie-looking creature that's been reported to be a rake. But I am skeptical of both pieces of footage, but at the same time, well, evidence, not footage, but context-wise, one or the other. But we will be diving into all of that towards the third act of the show. But, there's something about the Rake, though, that I think really attends to people, and I think it's the stories. And the stories are just something that I think attracts what many, and like any other cryptid story, I mean, what is it about these creatures? We don't gain an interest in them, because what starts the interest is when we hear stories about them. I had to hear a few Dogman stories before I really got connected into research, just to know what I would be researching and dealing with. And it's always something, too, to take a good pride in what you study, because, with the Rake creature, again, I looked at it through a creepypasta horror form, and I didn't really think too much of it. I just thought it was just a creature created for the, internet lore. And, I figured that because if you're not too familiar with creepypasta, there's Jeff the Killer, there's Slender Man, there's all these other characters that are inspired by real figures or just in general urban legend, but have often in folklore, they're just created characters but based on folklore of these mythical beings. In this case with Slender Man, in the German times of the Der Grobsmann, I hope I'm saying that right, was the tall man or the giant man in the 1600s during the Renaissance era. The Rake being a crawler, a demon or some sort of shadow caster or something like that. So there's always some sort of narrow ground in between direction of where these creatures could possibly come from. But would the lore of internet meme and scary stories conflict and not deliver a parallel line between the two connected dots? Absolutely. Because that's just the beauty of our internet, our social media, is that we can do that to help distract and to collude the cause on what we're supposed to be studying. So with all that being said, my little 2 cents overview wise on the Rake, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read you guys some encounters. Now, before I read these encounters, just a few things I want to clarify. Number one, these encounters could be genuine, these encounters could be fabricated. I know I never really said this on my other shows, but I mean, really, I keep this thought at the back of my head, and I think all of you should as well. All these reports I'm reading to you tonight, these are going to come from a few social outlets, and I want you guys to get an honest opinion on what you guys believe or may not believe here. Make up your own mind on all of these reports and your own intake on what we're studying here tonight. If you think that it's not a real story, if you think it's a bunch of bogus, write your opinion, your comments, your thoughts down below. I would love to see some social engagement on what you guys think of all these reports tonight. So, of course, first and foremost, please feel free to stress your feedback. Keep an open mindset, though, on these stories. If you do believe, if they're real, if you believe they're fabricated, just stress it. I would love to hear your feedback as possible. And always good to see what you guys comment. As well as also, just so you guys know, again, this is also, like I have stressed out again and again, even though that this could be of internet lore and meme, just keep a well-mind balance that think of it as a skinwalker or think of it as something supernatural, something that could manifest something here that could trigger such encounter. But also pay attention to some of the wording and some of the way some of the stories go. I will leave links down below to all of the stories I read to you guys tonight so you guys can take a good look at them. And third and final, I'm not going to do it with any background music. I'm not going to do any of it like this. I'm going to go back to my traditional maze. And the only reason why is because this is such a controversial topic. I just want to take a back seat of what many normally do when they discuss stories with the Rake, and just no scary music, no background, just a typical little nice background like now, and just going forth with it. So let's dive into some of these encounters. The origin of the Rake, in which of course came from the creepypasta forms, But as we know, is this reported hominid, there's this mysterious boneless-like creature. The earliest indication reports of a rake-like creature had came about when a mariner's log in 1691 identified the rake by name, which of course the proper origin, and there's no specific documents of this mariner that I can look up on the internet right now, but normally in this case this mariner had written about this creature and that had seen a sighting of it, and it was this mysterious looking being, and he had written a small passage about it at this time being, identifying it as the Rake. Another account in the 1800s described this creature as having this hollow black eyes, which have been described in many descriptions, and having this terrifying well-like appearance in nature, very similar to dogmen when they look intimidating, these giant 8 to 10 feet creatures weighing over 500, 700 pounds. And there have been also reports of people when they've had encounters with this rake-like creature who've committed suicide. As I've mentioned, there's been an ounce of tragedy. People have had nightmares. There was a report apparently from an individual in 2003 who had had a nightmare about this rake creature, and it was telling him to, of course, be the one to ascend out of the Agarthans. And it was something that was just truly frightening to this guy, and he had, of course, killed himself. But the most prominent story of the Rake, reportedly, was written in 2006. Now, this 2006 case comes from the creepypasta form, but also comes from a form of the indication of the origin of this Rake creature of the Skinwalker Legion. Now, reportedly in 2006, this family had lived, there's no specific date, there's no specific time, just a year, and what occurred. Reportedly, the family that was living in this house had a very mysterious visitor enter in one night. This woman, this wife, had awoken to what she felt was something of a mysterious, ominous presence, in which it was, and the presence had stared right at her. She was so ridden in fear that she was staring at this thing, and she had no clue what she was looking at. She was just baffled by what she was staring at. The husband, who is right next to her, he is beginning to awake, and he, of course, is a little out of it because he's half asleep. This creature gets up and approaches towards the husband, and the creature stares right at the husband for a couple of seconds, and then runs off into this children's room. Now, what happens next is apparently the children, or whomever, the daughter was mangled, mutilated, and apparently the last words were that he is the Rake. Something that, of course, the beauty of what could be good horror narrated, but at the same time, this woman had requested, of course, that the husband and daughter, we all go to the hospital. But the husband drove into a lake and killed himself and the daughter. And over the next couple of years, the mother, the widow, was trying to find any information or what could possibly be of this creature that had taken her family from her, and as a result had proceeded to go ahead and execute with Notion some voice recorders to see if the creature would come back. And as a result, there were a couple times where it did come back, but long story short, it was basically there to terrorize her, and she ended up taking her own life. That is the more common story of the Rake. That was the one that appeared on creepypasta and the forums back in the early 2000s, and a very interesting report of a reported Rake. I mean, again, it's a story. It could be real, it could not be real, but a lot of people in a lot of these cases I'll be reading to you momentarily seem to have some sort of mysterious vibe of which this thing has a spook connection. And the guy, the family, the creature staring at the individual, that's just some kind of mysterious, analogy, some sort of fright. But, I mean, it's intense because, no one knows what the hell it is. Nobody knows. And if this creature has capabilities like that, do something that terrorizing, it just justifies how intimidating and frightening this thing could be, even though that we don't know what the hell it is. Now, these next encounters are coming from Reddit, and, again, Reddit is a forum where people can post bull, and then people can post ordinary things that are actually genuine. There are a bunch of communities. There's a bunch of cryptid communities. I'm a member of a few. Hominid Encounters. This report comes from Hominid Encounters. I'm not going to give out the Redditor's name. I'm just going to go ahead and I'll leave the link in the description down below. You can check it out at the end of this presentation. So this first is a report coming from a guy who reportedly seen the Rake, and this was posted about a year ago. The following comes from this guy's post. Myself and my two friends were driving down a road near Hollinsburg, Ohio, when we see a creature that looked like somewhat of a rake. The creature was larger than a deer, hunched over on all fours, and had a light and pink grayish color to it. It was quite muscular and ran incredibly fast. The area of Ohio that there are a lot of wooded areas and many that I would not dare to explore, and if you have any possible explanations, please comment. This thread has been currently archived, but taking a look at a few of the photographs of Hollinsburg, Ohio, you can clearly see that there are some wooded areas here, and you can know that if there is a reported creature in these woods, whether it's a rake, whether it's a Bigfoot, whether a dogman, you get the picture here. You have something in these woods that could easily be lurking, and something that could lurk in that vicinity. Now, the description, as he mentioned, was that this creature was hunched on its back, hunched on all fours, not back, and it had this light and pink grayish color to it. Some people have reported the rake with a grayish, pinkish like attribute, almost which has been similar to sandhill cranes, with its pinkish glow to it, which have been often ironically been mistaken for the Mothman eyes, as a skeptical perspective of that cryptid. But what I'm saying is that it has this very creepy colorish vibe to it, had a muscular build to it, and had the ability to run fast. A lot of people who've reported the Rake have often said that it runs pretty fast and that it has a very intimidating presence to it, one of which has often been horrifying, to say the least. The following report comes from the Paranormal community forum on Reddit. This is a report that happened over a few years ago, and this comes from an individual who reportedly had an encounter with the Rake. Story goes, and I follow. So I was going on a hike near Wallace Falls, very dark, at least 10 o'clock. He had heard a screech from up the hill. When he had thought was just a vulture or another bird, he heard it one more time. It was no surprise that it probably had some sort of bin creature, and the more this individual heard it, it became less human and thought it was like any smart person would do. He ran away. The noise got louder, and he turned in the other direction and was terrified, having heard a twig or two snap. The individual was being followed. He had ran away even faster than before and looked back, and that there was some sort of creature, what appeared to be, as he said, an alien or not, but scary. To his amazement, he had gotten to his car in time, and if he didn't, he would have probably been dead, as he goes on to conclude. Now, there's not a lot of information. It sounds like the building more format of a Friday the 13th film, but also at the same time, you have this case here where, we've often heard reports of people being stalked in the woods by cryptids before. There have been people on Vic's show who've been reported on and telling about how these creatures have been stalked them and how they've been followed. Very similar case. These creatures will do that. I do believe they do it to, of course, get you out of these environments and for some purpose, whether because they want you out of their territory or there's something far more worse, in which many people go on to do the protection theory, that they're here to heat us off of possible threats. I'm still on the fence with that, but I don't think this creature would try to want to screech or throw an intimidation factor as strong as it did here presented with this individual. I mean, I could be wrong, of course, but I just find it to be quite unique for its sense of how it's played out. So the Rake creature, definitely something that truly stands out, or one thing that is interesting about it is the fact that a lot of these people who see this Rake have often had the fear factor of complete and utter shock, which is similar to other cryptids. So there definitely is the continuous presence. People, I think sometimes that because they don't have that type of possession in them, they do. It's just a kind of a directory of how they go about it and how they deliver, in a sense. So it narrows down, I guess. This next report happened a year ago, reported, and it comes from the Darkness Prevails subreddit. Big shout out to that, Darkness Prevails. The encounter with the possible Rake. The story happened, and it goes on to say, and I follow. This happened a few months ago while me and my boyfriend at the time and a friend of ours were walking around near the old river in our town. We live in a small town in Florida right on St. John's River, so unless you're into fishing, there's not much to do. It was getting late, around 10 p.m., and we decided to go check out this abandoned furniture factory a few streets over. When we got there, we checked the doors in the front to see if they were unlocked by any chance, in which they were locked, of course. We walked to the side of it where it had been partially demolished a few years ago. The lower part of the walls that had been there was still standing, making a fence-like barrier we'd have to climb over. I leaned over to the wall to see if we'd be able to walk through there, but there was just too much rubble and weeds in the way. When we decided to leave to head back to our cars, I was halfway to the sidewalk when from the weed-filled area came a deep, growly, hey-like sound. I stopped and looked behind me as the color drained from my face as I watched. I saw some of the weeds move. That's when I ran, leaving behind my boyfriend and friend. We had ran almost 2 blocks before we stopped and started walking through the neighborhoods back to the cars. The entire way back, we had heard something climbing across the roofs. Had rocks flung at us from tops of trees, and a pale figure ran quickly past us. The entire time this was happening, I had a strong feeling that the dread we got back to our cars safely, but we stood there for a few minutes trying to calm down sometime before we drove. It was all calm for a minute before we heard the creature climb up on the roof of a converted bank. It had paced back and forth just out of the reach of the light, throwing things at us in a tree or two a few times. It was so scary being followed like that through an area I used to feel so safe in. I did some research when I had gotten home, and the growl, the paleness and the spread of it, which matches the description, I found it in the Rake encounters. I think it only followed us and through things because there were just 3 of us just staying close together, and hopefully I won't encounter it again, at least not alone. This is one of those cases too that definitely distracts it from, of course, your typical Dogman or Bigfoot encounter. This one seems to have a lot of action to it. What starts off as just a brief investigation out of an abandoned factory had turned into a reality for this couple and their one friend, whom had rocks thrown at them from trees, had creatures peering out from left and right from each side when they were getting back to their car. So they parked at a far distance, and this place had to have been almost about a block or so made of just a pure factory. Now, it would make perfect sense for a cryptid or such creature to be in an abandoned facility like that because there's nobody around. I highly doubt that there'd be anybody in there, unless people toured those places for heckling, or of course teenagers into the rebel, or of course for, promiscuous activity. There's always some sort of boundary to why a creature like that would hide in such a small vicinity, but it truly is one of those mysterious cases. So out of these 3 cases so far that I've read to you guys, let me know what you guys think about them. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments or even the chat right now. It's some pretty interesting reports, I will say that. Now, the interesting thing about these next couple of stories is that there is a lot of very interesting things, and it's just truly one of which people have no explanation for. In this next case, this eyewitness is in the same problem. He goes on to wonder if it was a rake that he had seen or if it was something totally different. He goes on to say, and I quote, coming from the Paranormal forum, "I live in a very quiet country that a lot of people don't even know about, where nothing really happens. Saturday night, or rather Sunday morning last summer, my best friend and I were walking back to my place where she would be sleeping over after a night of partying in the city. Seems like the usual walking home routine, everything quiet and the city asleep except for a few cars who pass us on the way. We decide to take a shortcut, and that goes through the woods and along the old school route, and as we walk towards the open gate to the school, that is almost hidden by big bushes, I grabbed her arm to stop walking. Something had moved behind the bush, and then quickly it hid when it saw us. I can't really decide whether I'm just drunk or if it's just reality, so I ask my friend if she saw anything, and she gives me a weird look and says that she didn't. We walk a few steps closer, but we're still in a safe distance of meters away, and all of a sudden it shows itself. It peeks its head up behind the bush. It was white, had no face. It looks interesting, and it's wearing one of those bright, creepy, white top toe-to-toe Slenderman suits. This is where it gets strange. It knows that I've seen it, so it seems to try and hide better and hurries to the other bush. I can see it while it moves across the tiny street and into the other bush. It's extremely skinny, hairless. All of its bones are clearly showing, and it has a very hunched back. Its way of moving, I can only compare it to a gorilla, but smoother and more abnormal. It peeks its head up from the bush a couple times, and I quickly grab my friend and we run the other way as my heart is racing, and tears are streaming down my face and her face. Tears. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of true fear before, and the weirdest and the most uncomforting thing is that my friend never saw this thing. For a couple of months, I had just brushed it off as if it was some weird dude who had been dressed up and linked to scare people, but a couple of days ago, I unintentionally came across this link on the internet about a creature, the Rake. I had never heard of it before, but I'm very sure to this day that it was the Rake, even though I couldn't see its face in the early morning darkness. The commenter goes on to say this, and it's a very interesting closing argument. Though it says that the Rake is completely made up, I don't think it is. I think people accidentally made up an already existing creature. The Rake hasn't showed itself to me again, thank goodness. And since that day, I've never walked that shortcut again, not even with friends in the daylight. And have any of you guys experienced anything similar with this creature? So, this story kind of got me lost for a couple, because there's this one portion where he mentions a suit, very similar to Slenderman, which I thought was bogus at first. But the story does kind of sound in its own tracks like it's actually more to it in terms of what we're dealing with here. You know, you're dealing with something that clearly has some sort of vibration in its sense, that this thing, whether it has a supernatural ability or something that can obviously change its abilities and to mimic the human mindset or play tricks on us psychosis-wise. Early morning hours, could this guy have seen the Rake? Could this guy have not seen the Rake? We don't know. He most likely did, but the suit thing can catch people off guard. I still find in many cases like that with the Rake, or just in general, something of that mysterious vibe to it, that there is some things that really do get your feet going. The next report of an encountered Rake, guy had seen it from the feet away. This is his testimony coming from the Paranormal forums on Reddit. It was last week around 4 a.m. that I had turned off my phone for the night and went to use the toilet one last time. And because of the angle of a neighbor's outdoor light, it is not unusual to see lights shining through the window and even early in the morning due to it being triggered by motion, usually the wind. And when I had seen the light coming from the window last week, I didn't think anything of it, and for a brief moment the light was blocked off by something, which was slightly less normal. So I was looking over there. The glass to my bathroom window is frosted and prevents anything clear that is being seen without opening it. It was the light briefly, not jumping to conclusions. I had joked myself about how it looked creepy. This hand-like creature emerged. It became odd, and I became more terrified. I was drinking slightly at the same time. The light had also began to move position with the hands towards the open part of the window as everything met. I made eye contact with what I can only call the Rake. The light seemed to come from its wrinkly and very dark-skinned overall and very thin build. I began to get very dizzy as I had seen it, almost to the point of passing out. As I tried to regain my focus, the creature moved away from the window at some point, and oddly enough I never screamed or lunged. I was just confused, and I've never seen anything like this before. I'm right next to a wood where there is consistent noises, which we'll all assume to be owls, but I may go and take a look at night sometime. People seem to have a lot of luck with similar looking creatures at the woods at night. A possible other encounter of something mysterious or what? This individual was in the bathroom and he had seen what appeared to be a creature blocking the light of his neighbors. Let me know what you guys think of that story. It's a pretty compelling case, it sounds. This next report comes from a young man who had believed to have seen a rake-like creature while leaving work one night. I had a rather odd encounter with some hominid creature, or even spirit possibly, just a few nights ago, and I haven't been able to come up with a rational answer to just what I had seen. I suppose I will start with the story. It happened just a few nights when I was biking home from work, and I work closing shifts for my local Walgreens, so I get off work around 10:30. I live only 30 minutes away by bike from my job, but most of the way home is by a heavily forested trail, which doesn't have very main streetlights, so it's always pitch black when I'm going home. 5 minutes into my bike ride going home, I hit the beginning of where the streetlights ended and the darkness began, like I always do. I pull out my phone and turn on the flashlight option so I can illuminate my way home. Well, only a few seconds later, I turned it on and I tilted it up, and more and froze and saw in shock and terror, because I had seen this tall, skinny, pale-looking figure for a brief second before I fell onto all fours and, like the wind, was gone into the woods. Shortly after, I started to pedal as fast as I could because I had no clue what I had seen. When I had heard a low screech and whatever it was keeping pace with me, it was hidden in the woods at a sight. I managed to get out of that area very quickly, and I didn't see or hear anything after I left that heavily wooded area. But a while later on, I had caught the scent of what literally smelt like fresh blueberry pancakes or waffles, like as if someone was standing out in the field with a hot plate of just plain blueberry waffles or pancakes, which didn't make sense to me, as there are no buildings in the area of where that scent was, so I figured perhaps whatever it was I had seen was possibly using scents to try and draw me into those fields and woods. Now, I do know a few areas around the trail that are supposedly haunted. There's a diner theater that's not too far from it, and I suppose a haunted water tower in the area as well, and a couple other places, but I still, no matter what I think of, I can't rationalize or debunk it as it was something else. It couldn't have been a deer because I have talked to people around the area, and no one's seen a deer ever in that area. And besides, it was standing on 2 feet. When I saw it, it was like a hominid. It couldn't have been any other wildlife, because the only wildlife I had spotted were squirrels and birds. But I figured I would share the experience. When we hear cases of cryptids somehow using some sort of manipulation or some sort of way of convincing people to see them or to run into them, in this case, this individual sees this great-looking creature that may possibly be a rake, and then transitions and then goes into a different direction, and as a result, uses an odor to attract this individual in a way of curiosity. And it's a very compelling thing, but, you know, it's just rather strange in a sense. But I will say this, though. I mean, for what it's worth with all of these rake-like reports, or just something of a rake-like creature, you know, you hear on these forums pretty close to the same stuff, pretty close to the same things that people are seeing. But it was something rather freaky. And, of course, folks, I'm curious to hear your feedback. But there's one story, though, before we do conclude these encounters, that I think you guys would want to know about. This story comes from Hominid Encounters, reported about a year ago. My house has always been creepy. Growing up, I've had unexplained experiences starting from the first time I was 4, and never stopped. I live in rural Kentucky, one of those towns that solely rely on coal and is 5 years behind the rest of the world. In general, the whole town is still covered in thick woods that appear to have not been tampered with in hundreds of years. My house is placed right in the middle of mountains surrounded by an extreme amount of woods, and even a couple ponds. If that gives you the setting of my home, I don't know what will. This is where the real story begins. Growing up, I was never allowed to watch shows such as Ghost Hunters or even movies such as The Exorcist in my house because of the weird activity which goes on there. I had experienced at an extremely young age. My mom and I had lived in this house our whole life. However, one night, my family had made an exception and we all watched a documentary about Waverly Hills together. At that age, I was still slept in my room with my mom due to me being afraid of sleeping in this house. That night I woke up at 3 a.m., the feeling of something had watched me. I felt an extremely uneasy feeling. I had rolled over to take a look around the room with my eyes locked onto something standing beside my mom. It was extremely tall but looked as if it had a broken back and couldn't stand up completely. I thought it was slouched over and had extremely pale skin and bones sticking out under the skin everywhere due to how low and skinny it was. It had long claws hanging from both hands. Its face was sunken in and out under the skin everywhere. Due to how skinny it was, it had long claws hanging from both hands. Its face was sunken in and the eyes were completely black holes. A few greasy hairs were visible on its head. It had no colored clothes and no genitals or nipples. I was horrified. I rolled over and covered myself up head to toe with the cover, and I had refused to move or look out the rest of the night even though I was fully awake. Eventually, my mom had finally woke up that morning, and she immediately started complaining that her side was hurting. She raised her shirt to look and found huge claw marks down her side. It was 3 deep wounds which were extremely inflamed and still bleeding. I felt horrible knowing that the thing did to her while I laid in beside her, hidden. A couple months later, I had seen this creature again. Although not as horrible as the first experience, I was woken up to the creature slouched on the floor on my side of the bed. It was watching me sleep. I covered myself up again and immediately, but this time got the courage to peek out and found it still looking at me. I'm not sure when it went away because I didn't dare look again. The feeling this creature gave the room was horrifying. I got chills and my hair stood on end before even seeing it the first time. It had the feeling of complete evil to it. Many years later, now that I sleep in my own room, I still live in the same house. My mom still lives in the same room where she witnessed the creature. Almost nightly, she has nightmares about something watching her in her room, and she has nightmares about something hiding in the paintings on her walls or something coming from the ceiling in her room while she sleeps. There's one specific corner of the room where almost every dream seems to originate in. Our cats refuse to stay in that room if the door is shut. If anyone has any information about any folklore, can you please tell it to me? So that story is a kind of a hit of bigger. We mentioned about earlier psychosis. We mentioned about how these creatures have that ability to somehow kinetically abilitize or to just tune in, basically, to go ahead and to annihilate somebody, harm someone, and also to do further damage. It's incredible what we are looking at in terms of discussion on this Rake creature. But at the same time, we often think to ourselves, well, what is it? And how can a thing do such a thing? The eyewitness had mentioned that his mother had had recurring nightmares, and to this day, bad visions and what appears to be a creature in her room, creature in her paintings. These creatures seem to have some sort of ability to manifest our souls, interact with our psyches, and somehow find ways into our psyches, or it could be our imaginations playing the toll on us because of our drawn fascination. Despite the fact that the female eyewitness did not even be an eyewitness and have an encounter, she was asleep when this creature was there, but maybe she was awake when that creature was there and the young boy didn't notice at the time. He had made mention that the place was also haunted too. They live in Kentucky, and as you know, I had done a Kentucky episode earlier. Actually, as recent as a couple days ago with one eyewitness, and it was a very interesting thing to talk about because Kentucky's so haunted, and it wouldn't surprise me if this guy had an encounter in Kentucky, and this young man lived in Kentucky and had some weird, mysterious phenomena impact him along the way. So, after going basically over a half hour discussing all these encounters, some encounters might sound vague, some encounters might sound real, some encounters might sound like a bunch of bullcrap to some of you. But I want to get your guys' feedback on this. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about all of these reports I've read to you tonight. Now, let's get into our discussion on origins and explanation. So what can we say in origin of this creepypasta? There's so much to really go about, and it was kind of what the spice and beans were for the beginning of this show, and that was my inner frustration with it. Folks, I've read so many cases now of people who've seen the Rake cryptid and reported Rakes all seen throughout the world, and I don't know if many can say that it seems to be something continuously following in tradition. It has this mysterious supernatural ability which has made some believe it's a skinwalker, and personally I'm under the impression it's a skinwalker, and I think it might be just in fact a skinwalker for the sake of it being that you have a creature here that has all the characteristics of a mythological creature, one of which that can shapeshift, one of which that has a very ominous presence to it, has black eyes, and indications of that of many in the black magic. You'll note that there's a lot of creatures that do have that black eye, that characterization, and in this case, this is kind of that supplement. So it does appear to be something that has characteristics of that, and also, too, a lot of the reports from people who have ran into it. In the one case of the young man who had been riding back from his job and back on his way home, he had that odor of what appeared to have been breakfast. And I think for a lot of people who might take a look at that and be kind of questionable about it, well, maybe this creature has that ability, that magic. It could be a relic or something from a different dimension, interdimensional creature, one of which that has the ability to do so in such way. I feel that maybe this is a creature that is based on old mythology that has been incorporated into an internet sensation with different characteristics, but it's the same creature of that old mythology and just now being seen. But I think it just might be misidentified in that it is indeed a skinwalker rather than it being a Rake. As we know, the Rake, of course, as I've said, is just that internet class. But really, you're never going to change anybody's opinion on that. But even with common mythology. You look at a lot of these images, you look at a lot of these stories of mysterious Rake-like creature of being a skinwalker, the ability to change from man to object or to anything in general. But I think it's always appropriate to look at some things that can also change one's mind on something here that may or may not be what we think of. And I mean evidence, or what could possibly be on camera or video. So I want to take a look at some evidence here and some things that we can debunk and take a look at. And one of the things I want to take a look at first is the infamous trail cam image that took place back in 2010, reported of a trail cam capturing a photograph of what appears to be a rake-like creature staring right at it. Now, this photograph has come from various news sources, has also come from a few other people who have shown it on their podcasts, and there's been really no huge backstory on what it could really be, because a lot of the information is black box, meaning that it's anonymous. So, in other words, for many people who are trying to get good evidence, or at least what appears to be evidence, this isn't what it's supposed to be. I had came across a blog spot called The Skeptic's Boot, and these guys are pretty cool because they've taken a look at a few other pieces of evidence in which they've also debunked and have clarified a few things. So this entire information goes straight to them, their credits. Feel free to take a look at their blog spot too, folks, because they got some pretty cool stuff. But going back into it, reportedly this image was sent from the Daily Mail and it was remained anonymous. The photograph was reportedly taken in Berwick, Morgan City, Louisiana, and the story goes on to say, and I quote, that the hunter said that he was lying in wait in the pitch black when a ghoulish specter had filled his sights. Its eyes glowing in the light of his torch, it leapt from the undergrowth and flashed a look at the camera before vanishing back into the bushes. The hunter, who was chosen to remain anonymous, was so frightened, he said that he broke the camera but had retrieved the image from its undamaged memory chip. The picture was taken on a reserve as mentioned in Berwick, Morgan City, Louisiana. Now, this is the reported incident of what happened. Now, this is what happens and goes on to say next, which is pretty interesting. Many people began to kind of question if perhaps maybe that this creature was in fact a rake or something, but other people began to kind of question that perhaps this was promotional marketing for the upcoming Amazing Spider-Man movie that was coming out at the time. As mentioned, this photo was taken in 2010, and around this time too, there were auditioning and promotional still frames being put out to the public press for that responded movie. I highly doubt that that was the case because it does not resemble any of the creatures in the Amazing Spider-Man film, or at least the main villain. It looks far from it. But there was a similar creature that appeared in a video game that came out in 2011 called Resistance 3. Now listen to this piece of information because this is where it gets a little hot and juicy. Now reportedly, that Resistance 3 had been this big, critically acclaimed game, and I have also played it, and there is also a creature that is in this game that is titled Grim. And a lot of the information that was seeming to back up between this creature that was in a trail cam had also appeared to been also marketing for the upcoming game. Now, there isn't really a lot of imagery that can come back and back this up in a sense, but I'm just kidding. We do have a source. Now, this is an article that had taken place in December 10th of 2010, almost literally 9 years ago. Take a look at that date, folks. This is the official website source that is giving that this image is in fact an image of a rake or some type of creature, but it's called the Grim in Resistance 3. So this image, for a lot of people out there who have taken a look at this trail cam image and have said that it's real, that it's something of interest, it's not. It's fake. And this piece of imagery confirms it. This website source confirms it. So folks, I do strongly apologize to some who may have been really interested in such imagery, but it isn't the case, unfortunately. And I am also too disappointed because this image did spook me out. And even though that I didn't really remember Resistance 3 so much, that would make me kind of wonder that this creature, but now looking back at the information, it makes a lot of sense. So I hate to burst the bubbles of those who've went on to say that this is a real image, but unfortunately it's not, and the proof is right here in this video and a link down below to verify. So that confirms this piece of imagery on the Rake is some video footage. Now, this next piece of footage here, and I apologize for the clicking in the background, I'm actually currently playing this video and showcasing it simultaneously with me going through the recording, but basically, what we're looking at in this video too reportedly has been around since 2011 of what appears to be some sort of sewer creature, some sort of hominid that has glowing eyes and is looking through this catacomb tunnel, and then it moves at certain spots and then it appears once more, but it's peering its head back and forth, then reveals its body at a certain point in a sense, and is just looking at the cameraman or whomever it is, and then it actually begins to showcase its full body and then just darts back. It's a very freaky piece of video, and whatever this piece of footage is, it's been around on the internet for quite some time. Now, looking up some information about this footage, all appear to have something very ominous. Well, be prepared once more, because once again, this is not really the real case. This is also, too, another video debunked on what it is. I hate to be the bearer of bad news with evidence, but again, folks, to kind of really stress this controversial type of episode tonight, it really has to come down to further explanation, and there will be, again, a link in the description of where you can find the source of all of the information I'm telling you guys right now to verify it 100%. So, the video has been debated to be, of course, a infamous April Fool story. The original video had taken place at the Victorian sewer of a Victorian sweller located in the Northwest Water Company of United Utilities. Now, interestingly enough, this video is actually an April Fool's Day video, and this is the following information to go, and I quote: "The story of the clever camera and video trickery featured a fictitious character called Messi, said to be lurking in the Merseyside's sewers. United Utilities, which was behind the stunt, had received more than 60 calls from customers falling for the gag. The websites of both Echo and the United Utilities have also received thousands of hits with people wishing to view the grainy footage of the so-called monster. The hoax was all a part of the water company's What Not to Flush marketing campaign, which uses school visits, advertising, and planned rehearsal stunts to encourage customers to think before they flush." Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news again to such an infamous piece, but, you know, again, between the two pieces of footage and what appear to have been evidence, a lot of people over the years have claimed it to be something else, and I mean, really, I don't think with these pieces of information that we're looking at here that it's going to go off and skyrocket and say, oh, well, this is indeed true, or this is indeed the right thing. It's a bunch of bull. It's a hoax. And unfortunately for some have been tricked into it, and those who believe it's real, the pieces of information, people of the original sources, this doesn't lie. Now, there is another piece of video footage that has kind of caught my attention as well, and I had found it on the internet. Unfortunately, the original content poster of that video has had its account terminated, but the story of this piece of footage is pretty interesting because it appears to be a bunch of guys in a field and they see this creature, and it just seems to just cross the road crawling, but stares at them for a brief second. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this piece of footage because when I was doing the research for this episode, I really didn't know too much about a lot of the stories of the Rake or video pieces of footage that would be at least translucent to use that would be relevant, but I still look at it and I think to myself about this piece of footage, but to make a long story short, this piece of footage is pretty compelling, but also too, it seems to be quite unknown. For all we know, it could actually just be another animal on the skeptical side of things, but it's just rather strange that their account has been terminated, that the original poster's video cannot really be found. I found this from another YouTube channel, a very popular one, so I'll leave a link down below. Credit goes to that individual, but I just find it kind of strange that that account's terminated. But I mean, it really does make you wonder, what are people seeing? Now, apparently, this was a reported Kaneki, the Tokyo Ghoul, which, of course, for some in the Japan mythology, would be known as that version of a Rake or maybe a skinwalker, as this had taken place in Tokyo. So there is a lot of interesting things about this video. What do you guys think about it? It's pretty interesting, but at the same time, I mean, we don't know for sure. I mean, really, there's just too much to go on about it, and things that would really stand out in a sense. But then I want to talk about another piece of footage, and these next pieces of video have been around for ages, as early as 2006 and 2009, involving a bunch of people in the woods somewhere in believed to be South America, probably Mexico, or somewhere in the deeper heartlands of South America, such as Brazil, and people are in the woods and they see this creature laying far back somewhere, or what appears to be a naked man. When they go to call this creature's name, or whatever it is, it turns its head and it glows its eyes. You can see light illumination coming from that. Going back on some of the research history on this video too, I couldn't really find much. It appears that there seems to be another classified video on Origin just appearing on some sort of crypto form, but it is something of interest too, because this video has been around for ages and people do believe it is a Rake. People are under the impression it could be a skinwalker. It looks to be a skinwalker. The creepy thing about this video though, it appears that when the eyes reflect and it's illuminating, it just catches me off guard. I really do not know what to say to it, but it's just truly astonishing, but also too pretty damn creepy if you ask me. So now I want to present another video. This video I actually had discussed on my live stream a while back. This is a video of what appears to be a creature stalking a moose. Now this was taken in 2018, summer of last year, and it appears to be something just stalking this moose. Now there's something really interesting about this video, is the fact that this specimen in it, you can't really see its face because of the pixelation, but as this video shows, you appear to see something just stalking it for a brief second and is observing it. Now I don't really know too much about moose, but I'm pretty sure that if they had felt a presence of something else in the background, that they would be on alert. And it clearly in this video, it doesn't look like this moose knows about the creature, not at least what it appears to be. And for all we know, maybe this creature was able to use some sort of mysterious or kinetic infrasound, or some sort of ability to where its presence could be cloaked. But as you can see, there is something in the video, but it's one of those pieces that just truly stands out again, because we don't know what it is, and for all we know, it could just be the work of what appears to be a forest demon, or something along those margins. We do see what appears to be a white-gray margin and base, but it was just a pretty odd video, one of which that's always stood out to me, and I think with this piece of footage, it's just another thing to look at and take a look in the books and observe for future reference. It's just a pretty compelling case. Now, the next piece is a very infamous piece. This is a piece that I wanted to look at, save the best for last, something I think would be one of which a lot of you like, and that is the video of the infamous Rake in the backyard. Now, this video comes from an individual by the name of Richard Griebnick. I've probably said his name wrong, and my dearest apologies. Now, this guy had posted a video in 2017 of what appears to be a creature in his backyard. Now, this video has often been said to be reported that it's a Rake because of its presence and how it looks pretty white. I think because of the lights and also the webbing of the window or the screen of the door, it kind of makes it look like it is something white or ghoulish. But also, too, there are some certain parts in this video that truly do kind of set off a very creepy presence. For one, it looks like this creature is crouched in the entire time that it is actually staring at this guy. There's a brief second where it appears to get up, and it looks like it's hunched over, and then it kneels back down again. Because of the webbing of the door or the window of where the iPad, as mentioned, is presented, it does look like it kind of is just forcing or shapeshifting or morphing. And I think that's kind of something that catches some people off guard when they view this video at first, because of how this illusion, almost like a bokeh in photography, could easily gist off something of a smudge or what appears to be more than you can expect in such imagery. Now, as for the person himself, there seems to be not a lot of things that would give the vibes that it's a hoax. I mean, this footage has always kind of made me kind of think about it there and there, because when I look at it, I just see something that truly is just freaky, because it does look kind of like it could be a rake, but at the same time, it does look like someone who is just naked and is in the backyard and posing. Now, what's creepy about this is that there are a few instances where this creature appears to get really close to the door. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't seem to do anything or want to do nothing. It just seems to be observing whomever it's watching. And the individual, this Richard guy, is just trying his best to get rid of it. And he speaks to another individual, a pastor, and they start going in tongue of some prayer. And by the end of this video, basically, it appears like the creature kind of just backs off, and it appears to be just walking away in the far distance following this. Now, many have kind of claimed, including myself, that perhaps maybe the use of prayer, then the speaking and the talking in the tongue of using the Lord's name, has often been a result of those who could have a communication ground and try to, of course, take care of whomever in the situation with this creature, in this case, provoking it and scaring it off with the use of prayer, which has kind of led me to believe that this creature could perhaps be a supernatural demon, and perhaps maybe this is a demon or a shapeshifter, one of which that is trying to underhome something. Because there is a brief second before this prayer where this creature is just simply, and you can see it now, where it just is looking around, confused, looks like it's about to come in, get closer to this guy's backyard, and then proceeds to kind of do something really strange in a formal dance position, as if talking in tongue is kind of sabotaging this creature of the prayer, and it's warning it off, almost as if it's being shot not to be goofy with invisible bullets. But it warns off and walks off into the distance, which has kind of made me wonder if this is not a legitimate video, because of just how it walks off in the far black grainy distance. You can see it walk casually instead of using its weird type of presence it delivered throughout that entire video. But overall, though, is basically the majority of the videos of what we've observed here tonight and evidence of the rake. Let me know what you guys think. I know it sucks that a few of these videos have appeared to be fake, or at least evidence-wise, but at least for the majority in the long run, there is some clarification behind it that, of course, we can move on and press with down the road. Now, in my final conclusion and my final arguments on such creature, I do believe that there is a creature out there by the name of what could be taken as the name of the rake, but is a skinwalker or something more, and is out there and causing this type of encounters with people, and people seeing it from weird grainy distances, and so on and so forth. I really do not know too much to say about it in a way to go on and say that for sure, but there is something of interest, and there is something that really is out there that could be, and people are seeing it. Is it a demon? Is it something supernatural? It very well could be, but at the same time, we don't know for sure. And if you haven't seen a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, even though that this video does present me with a lot of skepticism, please think of it in a sense with, what's the big possibility of what it is? It's the ultimate what if. But I do believe it's a skinwalker. I don't believe it to be anything more than a skinwalker. But leave this video with an open mind, thinking, okay, maybe there are these type of Rake creatures, that they're skinwalkers. And of course, what it's known to be before, mixed up my words, is just a regular internet meme. But there is a such thing as this creature in a different formation, of that being a skinwalker and is the right terminology. But that's just me. Maybe that could be you. Maybe it could be you disagree with that and think of something different. But overall, folks, let me know what you guys think of the infamous Rake creature. Now, a few things before we conclude the show tonight. I want to thank you all again for tuning into this live show, or this premiere show. And this will be a Tuesday broadcast, and now it'll be a live show on the weekend, and then next week will be our October 31st show. I'm kind of giving you guys a small break from my content, but it's also in preparation for our 13-hour extravaganza, and I cannot wait to be discussing it, showcasing it, and everything all around it, because, folks, I'm excited to be doing this show, and it's going to be great to be adjacent and doing this Halloween show. I know that a lot of people are also doing some Halloween shows, but this is going to be my Halloween show, the 13-hour Dogman experience, whether you're here for the first 7 hours to listen to the compilation of what people from Lisa Lycan to Ricardo Sanchez to Brian Seach to Jody Cook, what they've all had to say about Dogman. And then we transition into a new interview with Lisa, and then we do a documentary show on the South Yorkshire Dogman, and then to top off the icing with the cake, we speak with Vic Cundiff. And for everybody who witnessed the experience but are just ready and tired to go to bed, we have some Beyond the Bonfire stories for you. I know you guys will like them, and it's all Dogman related. It's going to be Dogman on our show this Halloween. I know you guys are going to like it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But besides that, though, folks, if you would like to get in contact with me, you can reach me at this email, thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. A link is now presented on screen, as well as also down in the description. We also have another little source for you guys. If you guys would like to meet me or interact with me, we have a couple of social media links. We have a Dogman research group on Facebook. This research group is dedicated to, of course, the Dogman Cryptid and Dogman only. Folks, if you guys are willing to join a group and be interested, it'd be great to see you guys come and take a look at the Dogman research group. We are posting new updates every day. And same thing for the Venomous Fringe group. We want to try to get a lot of members in this group too, because, folks, I have I have 11,000 of you guys, and I know a lot of you guys probably don't watch my content as much anymore, and I understand why. I get it, but personally, the idea is that if you want to join something and be a part of something big here, this is a good way to, of course, interact and be a part of a community where you have the same beliefs and the same interests, and it's like, okay, I'm not alone in what I study, and that other people believe me and form a bond, And I've been stressing about having these groups made big because, I see a lot of other content creators getting their groups up and no problem, but, for me, I just think it would be right as well. Folks, if you love the show, if you're loyal to the show and you want to interact with me and be a part of something big, take a look at these groups, please. I'm not asking for much. It's not money. It's not anything. I'm asking you a simple favor to take a look at them, join them, be a part of something big. I can't stress it out long enough, and I guess I will keep stressing it, But anyways, besides that, though, we have a Discord where you can also engage with me socially. Not really use it as much as relevance-wise, but I also think it has a lot to do with the fact of how social media, in a sense, has taken more of the priorities, and Discord's mostly useful in a gaming stance, but we also have that link as well. And with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you Saturday evening with another episode of The Venomous Fringe. I'm Chris Fringe. You all have a great evening.